So part 2 of responsive web design, we are going to be learning CSS Grid, a little bit more complex with more variations than Grid View. So that is why we are doing it separately. You are going to start by going through the web readings. And these are all related to CSS Grid. All of the mobile tips and techniques that we covered last week will apply to CSS Grid as well. So making your images responsive and how to add responsive sizing and all of that carries over to this week. So our readings are just really focusing on CSS Grid. The lecture demo also focuses on CSS Grid, and there's a lot of different ways you can implement this. Okay, so you can do the grid item classes. Okay, and so we basically go through all these different ways that you can implement CSS Grid, but the one that I'm going to actually have you guys work on in the textbook assignment is the one that uses the template, because that to me is the most powerful way to implement CSS Grid. So we kind of go through all these different configurations, and then we get down to how do you use a CSS Grid template. And that is by defining grid areas and then putting them into a template. So this gets into how to do the template. Okay, and you could actually take this code and copy and paste it and use it. You can also go to this live site where you can kind of get a feel for the template and how that works. And the kind of the cool thing about what I really like about CSS Grid is that you can alter the way the content is rendered, which to me is super cool. Okay, so even though like in the HTML, the header section is going to be encountered first, typically, you can totally control where that displays. You see how I just flipped that down there? And that is all controlled through the template. So to me, that is super, super cool. Okay, so then we kind of compare and contrast. CSS Grid, Grid View, Flexbox, which is better. And then we talk about how to do the media queries using CSS Grid and how to do the printer friendly. Okay, so lots of examples here, lots of interactive examples for you to kind of go through and work with. And then we get into the assignments. So textbook assignment has videos for each thing that you need to do. And of course, there is a folder for you to download because your focus this week is on the layout. And so that is the part of the CSS that you are going to be adding. Okay, and I am giving you the rest of the page. Same with the rest of the layouts. So we do one CSS grid for a Dr. Seuss site. And then I have you download a responsive page review folder where you're going to do all three. You're going to do Flexbox, you're going to do Grid View, and you're going to do CSS Grid to kind of reinforce what the differences are between them. And you'll notice that it's the same page and the same graphics in all of these to start with. And all you're doing is tweaking CSS. And the CSS that I have here is all you need to incorporate Flexbox. Even less CSS to change it to grid view? Okay, and then how do you change it into CSS grid? Okay, so that's pretty much what you are working on for the textbook assignment. You'll transfer everything live. Make sure that you do test for the print CSS, because that is something that I check for. And then you'll do the lab assignment, which is similar to the one you did last week. You can actually reuse all your content. The only difference is that you're going to be doing CSS grid for the layout. That brings me to the discussion forum. So you are going to showcase one of your responsive pages. So it can either be the one that you did in grid view, or it can be your CSS grid page. Okay, so do one or the other. And you're going to post a link to the page. Okay, and then you're going to describe who the audience is, what the purpose is, and then, why did you pick that layout? So, you're having a choice between CSS grid and grid view. So, why did you pick the layout that you picked? And as far as how you grouped your different elements together and the color scheme that you picked, I want you to explain why you made those choices. Okay, then you are going to look at your classmates' postings and reply to one of them, indicating what you liked about their page. Okay, so that is what you're working on this week. For those of you who wanted to get a head start on the final project, I did post the directions here and a checklist. So some people do find it helpful to print out the checklist, and then, you can just kind of cross things out as you complete them. The directions and the checklist basically have the same information in them. They're just formatted different. So this is just formatted more like a table where you can cross things off. And the other one is more conversational. So it kind of goes, it's personal preference as far as which one you would prefer. I do have a video here kind of describing what you need to do. So that is in the actual final project page itself. And you will notice that a lot of the requirements that are in here, if you're going to reuse a page from the grid view or CSS grid exercises, you have a lot of them done. So you only have to incorporate things that are new. So that's why I think the checklist will come in handy, because if you are kind of reusing one of those projects, you have viewport in there, so you can cross that out. You've got the meta tags in there, so you can cross that out. Your projects for lesson 11 had to have 2 images. Well, this final project has to have 4. Okay, so that's something that you're going to have to add. Make sure you have the required tags. You should have your external style sheets. And honestly, they don't have to be named print or index. If you leave them at, the grid view and grid view screen and grid view print, or, whatever, that's fine. So you do have to have, grid view or CSS grid as your responsive layout. And then you kind of can look through here. I think your lesson 11 had to have 3 links. This one has to have 4. So there are some differences and you have to incorporate them in. But we have covered everything that you need except for the JavaScript requirement. The JavaScript requirement we have not covered yet. That is in lesson 12. So you can pretty much do everything except the JavaScript. You're going to have to wait until we go through lesson 12 to add that. But you can get a pretty good jump on this project. Okay, so that is what you're going to be working on this week. And again, the only things that are required is the textbook assignment, the lab assignment, and the discussion forum. You know, getting an early start on this final project is totally up to you. I do want to point out that we do have Thanksgiving break coming up. So we actually don't have classes on Wednesday, and then it runs through Sunday, and these assignments are due Sunday night. Okay, so that is the assignment. If you guys run into problems or have questions, please let me know, and I hope you have fun with this.